Welcome to The Edge. I'm Eonin here with a review of a very cool knife that's about to come to market in the very near future. That's right, today I bring you the Riggi Knives Jersey. Now this is a prototype. So let's jump in like I always do with some basic specs. On this prototype version, the blade steel is 14C28N. We've got a high flat grind with a nice swage on the top, drop point, bead blasted, nice sharpening choil built in there. I like it. We've also got bead blasted full titanium liners on this knife. It is a frame lock with very nice lockup on it. It's riding on dual ball bearings. Very nicely done logo there. We've got a spring clip with countersunk screws, very low spoon, so that should be pretty comfortable. Titanium back spacer. So a really, really good looking knife, a really nice, simplistic design, but at the same time, a really good looking knife. So let's talk about a few other specs here. We got a 2.75 inch usable cutting edge on this knife. The scale length on this knife is 4 inches, and the tip to tail length of this knife is 7 1/4. The weight on my digital scale came in at 3.7 ounces. So let's talk about what I like. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about the knife in general. So honestly, this knife spoke to me. I put this knife in my hand and it spoke to me right away. It is a simplistic, elegant knife, but it's utterly functional as an everyday carry knife in what I like to call the medium size category, meaning I have large glove size hands, and for me, mediums are knives that I can at least get all 4 fingers on and hold in a comfortable and fairly ergonomic position. This knife checks that box. It's being OEM'd by Shield & Knives, and the materials and build quality on this knife look and feel excellent. Lockup is good, action, solid, fires right out there every time, and it's fairly fidgety. Now again, this knife was part of the Apex Pass-Around Group knife. A couple people have had a chance to handle this knife, but honestly, I'm glad that I got in on it because I really do enjoy it. Carrying and cutting, though, is where this knife really earns its keep. It's not a very thick knife. It's got nice smooth scales. There's a little bit of texturing from the bead blasting, so it doesn't feel slick or slippery. It's got a little bit of mild jimping up here, which is really nice, just in the right spot, right where your thumb typically rests. And even for me with a little bigger hands, I still tend to catch the front part of this jimping a little bit, so that's really nice. There's also a tiny bit here on the bottom side of the flipper tab, but the ergos on the knife are good. Your hands want to wrap right in there. The 14C28N steel has really held a great edge. Even after mowing through a small heap of cardboard in my garage that I had to get rid of and take out to recycle, and cutting through some rope and a few other things at my job that I would typically use my medium-sized EDC carry knife for, all I really had to do with this knife was just run it over my strop here at the house a couple times on each side, and it's right back to nice and sharp and super slicey again. So kudos for that. It definitely, like I said, has held a good working edge even after being used a lot. And I do try to use all the knives, although because this is a prototype, I do not tend to try to hard use knives that are prototypes. There's only a limited amount of them around, and I want to make sure that they're in good shape for the next reviewer. But overall, the blade shape, the way it cuts, the way it slices, the ergos are all excellent, folks. This is the real deal. So again, I mentioned the knife has good ergos. There's enough space for 4 fingers on the grip, even with my hands. Like I said, some nice touches. The beautifully done logo here with the spade and the NR initials in there for Nick Riggi. That's really, really nice. And I love that there's not a whole bunch of billboarding on the blade, right? You know, you could put, you know, whatever the blade steel is over here on the bottom of the flipper tab somewhere, but this front side looks really nice and clean and has a really high-end dressed up look to it without being overdone. Also, one of the things I dig, and it's something that I talked briefly with Nick about, I really like, I noticed this before we talked, but I really like how there's a raised up surface here around the pivot collar. It just gives the knife a really, really slick look, a really fashion look, a really elegant look, but it's perfectly functional too, because when you hold it like this, you do find your fingers kind of stopping right there where it's raised up instead of sliding straight over. So I like that as well. Again, the logo's really nice. There's not a lot of billboarding on it, the raised pivot collars, all that stuff I mentioned. I also love the two-tone of the bead blasting. They went with a lighter color here on the blade to show off the blade, to accent the blade a little bit, and a darker, more subdued type of blasting media on the handle. So those are all things I really, really dig. These finishes also, folks, some of you might know that I'm not a big fan of satin finishes on knives that you're going to carry every day. Why? Because they show a lot of scratches and they tend to get fingerprinted up really, really easily. I love this bead blasted version. This to me is the perfect type of finish. It wears a long time. It looks good. It takes a lot to kind of wear it off and make it shiny. And also, it has a little bit of texturing to it, and it tends to hide scratches pretty well. So this two-tone look that's on this knife is really, really, it's really sexy. It really looks nice. The pocket clip on the knife is fully functional. It's a deep carry clip with countersunk screws. It's got enough depth back here to get into a halfway decent thickness pair of pants or clothing. And it also slopes down really shallow and has a very shallow small spoon on the end of the clip. So no hot spots there. This knife feels really good in your hand. It has decent stack height. It's not too big, it's not too wide. And I will talk about the clip and some other things in just a few moments. But generally speaking, this is done really well. The most impressive thing about the knife is that it carries really, really well in your pocket. When you have this knife in your pocket, there's nothing here to catch your hands on. You don't feel anything here. It's not like you stick your hand in there and you scrape it up against the side of the knife. It's just a really well-designed knife. It fits in your pocket really well, slim enough and light enough to EDC carry. You forget that this thing is even there. 2 thumbs up for that one. So let's talk about issues or problems. There really aren't any issues or problems with the Riggi jersey. That being said, here's a few things that are going to change, and this comes right from Nick himself when I spoke to him on the phone. The production changes for the knife will be, the knife is either going to come in a 20CV or an M390 blade steel instead of 14C28. It will have all T8 hardware, including the pocket clip. So that's going to be kind of cool for all of us fans out there who don't like T6 bits, even though if you got a quality one, it's usually not a problem. The Riggi logo on this side of the knife will be a little darker or / bolder, so you'll be able to see it. And it is kind of cool. It's a really neat logo. I dig it, and I think that it should stand out a little more, but it has a really nice look to it. And then there's going to be a small amount of internal milling inside the knife, inside the scales and the frame lock. And I think that's good. Nick said he's doing that to just bring the weight down just a tiny bit, not too much. But there's also one other suggestion I made to him in regards to all that he really seemed to like, and I think might actually make it into the production knife. We'll see if that happens. But generally speaking, the knife is solid. There's really not anything that I can say bad about the knife. Even the jimping, which isn't super aggressive, is just enough to add that nice little grip to the top of the knife. And I feel like it's a little bit understated, but it's really well done, and it does add a little something to the top of the knife without being too overly aggressive. So let's do a couple quick size comparisons here, because I have a few other things to say in my summary. So here we have the Jersey. And here we have another knife that's in this size category. This is a knife that a lot of people are familiar with. This is the Asher Tie Sparrow in reverse tuck. So you can see the Sparrow's a little longer overall, but it's generally in the same size category as the Jersey. Now let's throw up a knife that I believe this knife is very comparable to. This is from one of my favorite knife designers. This is a Ray Laconico knife. This is the Kaiser Tie Gemini. And you can see there are some similarities here in the design. Some differences too. I have to say, I dig what Nick did with his flipper tab on the Riggi a lot more than I like this kind of squarish shark fish, big kind of square thing sticking up on the back. I think this one is a lot more elegant looking. It's got some, some rounding to it, but it just feels less obtrusive in your pocket than something that's a little more squared off. But the Gemini and the Jersey, they've got some similarities. And honestly, the Gemini is what the Jersey most reminded me of. And the Gemini is one of my favorite pocket carry knives in that size range. So let me show you one more real quick before I wrap up and give you my overall thoughts. This is another medium knife. This is the Benchmade Mini Presidio. And again, you can see bead blasted blade instead of satin or stone washed. Ergonomical handles, and similarities in the width. I love this low profile pocket clip that is on the Riggi. But that gives you some ideas of where this knife fits into the size chart. So let me summarize. Let me wrap up what I believe this knife represents. For me, the Jersey strikes the perfect balance between premium materials and look, while also being a comfortable, durable, and fully functional medium-sized EDC knife. That, folks, is uncommon. That's not an everyday occurrence in this category of knives to get all of those categories wrapped into one knife. So you can tell I am on board. I like this knife. I fully support the development and the build of this knife. The expected retail for the production knife in 20 CV or possibly M390, according to Nick, is going to be around $200. I think that's a fair price for this knife with those kind of materials and build quality. It could be a little less. He's not exactly sure of the price, but it's going to probably be somewhere in that range. There may also later in the future, depending on the popularity of this knife, be a budget version that does have 14C and maybe a different handle or scale configuration. So that's good news too. Expect to hear more about this, the Jersey, from Riggi Knives, and hear more about Nick Riggi in the very near future. Trust me, folks, when I tell you, I will not let you forget about this knife or this knife designer. Once again, thanks to everyone out there for the look-see. Thanks to my minions who follow and support the channel. I greatly appreciate you all. I hope everyone liked this review. And stay sharp, folks. See ya.